Victor mentioned, I'm a consultant at this One Special Place currently. I am writing blogs as well as holding trainings, webinars for parents as well as professionals on various topics through One Special Place. I'm a speech language pathologist, of course, and I've been trained from Aish, Mysore, with a bachelor's and a master's degree in this same. And I have 10-year plus experience working with the pediatric population, largely with children with autism. So my focus always has been on communication, furthering communication with speech and other ways to do the same. That's sort of my passion when working with a speech language pathologist. So I'm hoping to be able to share a lot of tips with you along with Pratiksha. And happy Mother's Day once again
Yes,
to everybody.
yes. So yes, so, we want to keep it as an interactive discussion today, so that Tanushree and I would be going through some agenda points where we would be talking about various skills that are needed for a child to start talking, and that's how we follow the same approach as what we follow in our speech therapy
That's right.
programs as well. So yeah, so to proceed, I would first quickly give everybody a glance of the topics, the flow of today's discussion. So we would be talking about something a little on the communication pyramid, which skills should be acquired first, what are the various skills that are needed for children to learn to talk. We would touch briefly on how speech is dependent on many aspects, and then we'll touch base with various skills of pre-linguistic and listening skills, attention span. Then we would go a little more to talk about receptive language skills and what activities and tips can help all moms and therapists who are with us today. Then we would go on to the expressive language skills. After that, we would talk a bit about social communication skills, and lastly, we'll see how we can improve the speech or the communication environment at home. And yeah, so basically, this is what we've planned for today. And so, Tanu, starting with children learning to talk. So, can you share something from your experience when it comes to the basic skills that are needed
Sure,
for
absolutely.
for children?
Before we talk about the skills that are needed, I want to highlight how important we feel speech is. Everybody, parents, amongst us adults, etc., we are very cued in that we need speech to communicate. But I think when there is a child with delays or the child has communication delays, we realize the pressure for them to speak becomes more because they're missing that aspect many a times. When we put the pressure on
Yes,
speaking, what happens is we forget a lot of the other skills that make up speech or that help build speech also. So those are things that we are going to be discussing today, like you highlighted. So speech is important, but we must remember that speech is not the only way that we communicate. So at the moment, I am using a lot of speech to communicate with you, but I'm hoping I'm also communicating with my eyes and my hands, trying to get you the whole message across, which a lot of parents and I think neurotherapists miss out on. They're always pushing on speech, not realizing how much pressure goes into just pushing speech at that point.
yes,
So let's talk a little about the
absolutely.
other aspects that you asked about that are important for learning speech. And that's where the communication pyramid, in my opinion, comes handy. And this is something that I've been sharing in my experience of the last 10 plus years with all parents is the communication pyramid. So speech by itself is not, it doesn't come across or come about by itself. But if we look at children who are developing from 0+ months, we realize they have many other ways to communicate, which our children with communication delays must also be able to pick up. Simple things like watching the others speak. So I think we're listening well to each other, we're watching each other well when we're having this communication.
Yes.
I think those are the building blocks for a lot of the speech building at a later point in time. The viewers or the listeners
Yes.
right now, they're listening brilliantly. Hopefully, a lot of them are listening brilliantly to this talk. So that is very, very important for speech building. You must be able to understand what's being communicated, be it by my face or by my words. If you don't, not only the English language, but the aspects within the language, every word that I'm saying, all that becomes very important when we're trying to get a child to talk. So you cannot only focus, in my opinion, on speech. You must focus on these building blocks or the communication pyramid before you
Absolutely.
push speech and say, okay, I want to use it to communicate to another person like I am to you or to someone over the phone. There's
Yes.
so many aspects that I think sometimes because there's so much pressure on speech, everyone tends to forget it. But as a speech
Yeah.
pathologist, we cannot and must not.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I remember once, when we would, you and I were chatting a few weeks ago. About the model of, so how the foundations have to be, the building blocks have to be listening and attention, and then the further bricks are receptive and expressive language, and then last comes, also receptive language, and the third, the roof, is the expressive language, or really the words that the child talks or speaks.
That's
So
right.
I completely agree. Unless and until we hit the foundation and we make it, we would not be able to achieve and move up the pyramid.
So
Um,
I just want to
Actually, we
share
had
one
made
thing.
an
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, I just want to
No,
share
no,
one
no.
thing. So,
Please.
a lot of parents or even newer therapists who are in the area of speech and language, they tend to attack, I would say, speech. So, they're drilling speech, they're working on speech. Many times, what we do see, and parents may have come across, that the child's picking up words. But after a while, there's a plateau in skills. That's when the worry starts kicking in.
Yeah,
And that's where what you were saying, I feel is very important, the foundations. Because there won't be a complete progression till you hit the foundations, though you see a spurt initially, but then you will see a plateau if those foundations are not strengthened.
are not, absolutely, absolutely. And all, most speech therapists do understand the fact that speech develops in stages. So it
That's
just
right.
doesn't happen that suddenly child will just start forming sentences or phrases. So it's always a stage procedure where the child learns to communicate first using social skills of smiling and looking into the eye, and moving up to babble, and then repeat sounds, and then form words, and then phrases. So I think all
That's
parents
right.
should also understand that suddenly it wouldn't come up one day, but if your child is babbling and variegated sounds, a variety of combining various sounds to form various words, then he's on the right track. And if you keep stimulating him better, he would surely start speaking words
That's
eventually.
right.
Okay, so yeah, so going on to the next thing, we did talk about the communication pyramid and the various ways. Can we quickly touch on something on the various ways children use speech? So it's not just talking, like we've been harping on this. It's not just. So there are various ways in which children can communicate, and we use those ways and understand them even in our speech therapy um, sessions and interactions with the child. So I think, Tanu, if we can talk a bit on the various ways
Yes,
a
absolutely. So
child uses
I'll give
to.
you the example of what I'm doing right now for everyone to understand that at various levels. So even when I think when you were talking, I was still communicating with you by nodding and maybe going, I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying. So
Yes.
communication is
Yes.
everything. Speech is just a part of it. And this is something I really, really believe in that parents must understand. I know I'm going to reiterate this. The parents would always say, but I want my child to speech, and therapists are pressurized to get the child to speech. But we must be aware of the different ways that a child communicates. It can be, of course, pointing. That's an ideal way for a child who
Yes.
isn't using words to communicate. So they'll point at what they want. Of course, one must remember children with some speech and language delays or developmental delays, they might not be able to learn pointing till taught. A child
Yes.
might even communicate by looking, and I see a lot of very young children do that. They're looking at what they want. They're looking at a person who's familiar at comfort for comfort. So that's a way to communicate their feelings, communicate what they want to say without speaking. A child will
Yes.
even at this stage of babbling, be able to emote expressions with the body. So it might be just flapping the hands, or it might be holding
Yes.
themselves away. So that's an communication in entirety. With children with speech language delays, we'll see a deviance, or they'll communicate slightly differently. So we might see children who are screaming to tell their needs because they don't have words to do the same. We might see children take
Yes.
their own things. They become more independent in some ways, I feel. Well, they'll take maybe
Yes.
the packet of biscuits by themselves and try to open it.
Self.
Um, I think communication is even emotions of frustrations, throwing things. Um, so
Yes.
there are a
Yes.
variety of ways that we see typically growing children or neurotypical children communicate, and also children with some differences or speech and language delays communicate. So these are just some of the ways. Even other ways, for example, writing, pointing to pictures.
Yes.
Those are ways that
Yes.
we would teach a child to communicate if they cannot come out with words. So I'm not sure if the viewers have heard of augmentative and alternative communication. You may have heard of AAC. I'm a huge advocate for AAC. One must remember that even if you teach a child to talk in different ways by pictures or by sign language, like okay, hi, for example, the child will still be able to learn speech, but give him time. Prepare him with those foundational skills. I feel all of that is very, very important for a child to finally, hopefully, come up with speech skills.
Yes. I agree. I mean, a lot of parents do not understand the importance and pictures, and they don't want their child to see, use them. So I think, again, from all of us, when personally, even I feel pictures is a great way to language, and whatever he wants to talk, the information is right in front of him for him to process it and then express himself.
Yeah.
Yes, thumbs up on that aspect.
I
I
would
definitely feel.
I'm going to add one personal aspect about this. And so I have a young daughter of 2 years, and being a speech therapist and a full time mom for the first year, I made it a kind of a point to get her to communicate. And so it's something what I was doing as a speech therapist all along. I would always introduce a lot of signs. And she, of course, didn't start using words for the first 6, 7 months. She was an early talker. So she started using some words by 8 months. But before that, I knew there were points when she was hungry. I knew points there were she was frustrated with things, and I taught her very specific signs. So it could be milk, it could be anger, and to my surprise, and even we're a neurotypical child, and I've seen this with my children that I've worked with in my caseload. They started communicating more effectively, and I'd see she was a calmer child. I'd seen that she was able to engage more meaningfully with me across because she was able to tell
Yes,
her needs without speaking. And I think that is something what parents and professionals should remember. It is, and right now she's talking words, sentences, etc. So it's not hindered speech, but it's been helping her deal
yes.
with aspects when she didn't have words. So that's very, very important, in my opinion, for all parents to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, and I have gone through a similar journey, and I think it's important to bring in all aspects using more gestures and signs and whole body language and speech alongside. But I've also seen parents, who go by the book and you're using speech. So even that is not something I actually have seen parents do, this and that, and they would not use the words. So it's important to identify the signs along with the verbal output, along with the word,
Yes.
and that's how the child would foster and express himself or herself quicker.
So that refers to the
Back to
speech
our
environment, right?
yes, in a way, yes. We would be touching the speech environment uh, in a while. I'm being guided by a north star again. I'm going back to the agenda points that I had thought of doing, that we decided on doing today. So um, um, yeah. So Tanu, can we now move on to maybe talking a little on listening, importance of listening skills, and the pre-linguistic skills of eye contact, joint attention, and how important they are. If you can just give a glimpse of that, I would like to share some activities to build those after
Absolutely.
you're done.
Sure. The pyramid, the foundation, the basics of the pyramid basically talk about the pre-language skills or the pre-linguistic skills. They are the readiness tools, in my opinion, for building other skills. It's not only speech, but also understanding, etc. Listening can be combined with it or can be an offshoot of it. It really depends on how you look at it. So the pre-linguistic skills or the readiness skills, as you mentioned, are watching someone or giving eye contact or looking at an item when it's being shown to you, paying attention towards an
Yes,
activity for a duration of time. So, not just for a
yes,
few seconds and then moving off. Then you haven't really got the whole information by doing that. So, in a way, you're concentrating on the activity or the words or the picture for a while and able to take in the information at that point in time. In my opinion, we should also look at the abilities to sit through the activity. So that is something we should look at. So you can look at it two ways. You can actually have the person be able to sit for a while and do the activity or move along but still pay attention or listen to the activity. So some children with delays may also be listening to the activity but not able to sit through it. So those are a few things that we need to keep in mind. Waiting skills, turn taking skills, in terms of basic turn taking. So if you're doing an activity that requires you, for example, block building. So if I take a block, I expect the child to wait till it's his or her turn. So those sort of things form the foundation of the pre-linguistic skills, the
yes,
foundation for learning. So as I mentioned, the listening skills come with it. It's how well you're able to listen to the information, take in the information, wait for your turn when you're listening so that you can respond. All that becomes very, very important when you're building on skills. But it's not the easiest for a lot of children, and sometimes these skills are missed out by parents because they're looking at the higher level skills rather than these basic skills.
basic ones. Yes. So yes, I'd quickly like to summarize this. So I think three, four things take away for listeners to sit. I mean, I thought I've put this up in the form of a picture representation also, and added it in the album, which can be accessed from the One Special Place page later for our viewers. So first, make sure the child sits. Second, he looks at you. You can think of reducing the distractions around. These are just tips to build more attention and listening. You can fragmented sense statements. So say, Sia, play. You use the child's name, and then you always use a fragmented statement before starting an activity that gets your child to listen to you better and gets him to start the activity. And as Tanushree also mentioned about wait time, and waiting and pausing for your turn and encouraging that behavior. And the last one I also think is reflecting and thinking about what you heard. Is also maybe for little older children, but it can be very helpful in building more listening and attention skills. So one quick activity that parents and therapists can try and incorporate, especially parents can, take your child for a listening walk. So You can choose a range of environments. So one day you go for a listening walk to the in the park, or in the shopping mall, or a listening walk around the house. And you just there are various ways in which you can use this small activity. You can describe the sounds that you're hearing. You're quiet, and the child and you yourself are hearing what the sounds are around you. You come and once you're done with your walk, you come home and reflect and see what all describe them. Some variation, draw out a listening map wherein you take a piece of paper, and you draw just random things of what you saw and what all you heard. Interesting. You can even record these things on your phone, and come back and listen to the recording again. So what all you heard. And for older kids, you can always plan ahead and sort of make a checklist, like a listening walk checklist. So I think when we are going to for our listening walk in the park, these are the things I'm going to hear. Sit with you and keep ticking off whatever you heard. I hope you guys, moms especially, would find this activity interesting to build on skills in children. There are various other activities. We'll keep posting some more articles as days roll by. Anything else you would like to add, Tanu? I thought it'll be a simple activity for
Yes.
listening.
Well, I feel a lot of story information, and stories can even be about the child's life otherwise. Having a phone handy is always very useful. So, like you did with the listening of sounds, I would actually have narrations put up, and of course, it's slightly higher level, and you're actually having visuals
Yes.
or audio of narrations, and a child will recall it. So, it becomes a higher level language as well as listening activity. But like you've mentioned, doing a lot of activities
Yes.
with the child does in the daily routine. So it might be going shopping and
Yes.
using the memory and listening skills to be able to recall the two things that mommy said we should look for, become things that we can work on.
So, yeah, so another quick activity that I can do off the bat is I conduct sessions. So what I do is to engage children and to listen to me more. So say when I'm reading the story of, say, Red Riding Hood, and I give the children sitting in the group a rattle, or any noisemaker. So I tell them, okay, whenever you hear the word wolf, you shake it. So that's how really engage children
Absolutely.
by simple activities like these. And even in songs, I feel, so say if you're singing Old MacDonald Had a Farm, and you say, okay, so whenever you hear the word cow, you need to say moo moo, or something simpler depending on the child's level and understanding and age.
That's a
So
wonderful,
definitely
fun
there's a lot.
activity.
Yes, yes. Okay, going on to the next set of skills. If you can talk something about receptive language, Tanu,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
I think if we
Um,
can, yeah,
we'll talk a little about it because it's super important to be able to build on
yes,
receptive. Now, to let the parents and professionals know that, like all typically growing children, receptive skills needs to be built before you actually can focus on the speech or the expressive skills, as we call it. So, focus on receptive skills.
yes,
I would say use words or simple sentences and simple words often, especially for a child who's just beginning to learn language or just beginning to pay attention to what you're saying. So repeat words quite often, and that's something that's important. For example, if you're using or teaching the child open. Now, that's a example I use really often, but it's very useful. So you would like to use the word open many times within the sentence. So open the door, we need to go out, or
yes,
open the book, we need to read it. So, of course, always put meaning into it. Don't use open randomly when open the door and no one has rung the doorbell, which I think sometimes does happen
yeah,
because we want to test the child, and that's not teaching. You want to do
yeah,
it in meaningful situations. So use simple words, use them often. Make sure that you associate an item with the word or associate maybe even a tune. So if you're doing open and a child's
yeah,
really struggling to learn that, so you can say open, open, versus maybe clothes, you have clothes, 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 clothes. So it really depends how you really want to teach the child, or where the child gets his or her attention from. I like to
Yes.
associate a lot of pictures with words or actions. They would be signs. So I would say a lot of open the book,
Yes.
open the door. Again, like you very rightly mentioned, say the word and do the action so that the child remembers it. And hopefully we'll
Yes.
be able to register it more often. So that becomes very, very important. So those are a couple of things. Of course, there's a lot more that we need to look at.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
for a beginner that we'll be able to help with.
Absolutely. So again, referring back to the album that we've put up, it's got pictures of all these tips. So first, associate items with words to work on receptive language. Associate words, use words often in the same situations, like Tanu was mentioning about open, which provide non-verbal cues. So open, open, use your hands, use signs, read some books, read books and discuss. That can be a very handy tip. And
Absolutely.
you can also look at following directions, which can be
Yes.
very simple to do at home. Um, okay.
I think I just want to
I
add, it's just
Yeah.
sometimes we get lost at what to work on for receptive skills. In the sense, do we work on words? Do we work on sentences? What part of the words do we work on? Articles like a, the, or do we work on, like you said, directional words? And I think it's very important to remember that there is a hierarchy there too. And parents should refer to a speech therapist to be able to provide that hierarchy. You cannot be working on objects as car and then all of a sudden doing longer sentences, or you cannot be working on directional words and then saying, okay, maybe I want to do prepositions. Just randomly, you're not helping the child too much. But as
Yes.
speech therapists, all of us know that many times you're working on things parallelly. You're not only going to work on words, you're going to work on actions and words,
Yes.
like run, throw,
Yes.
ball, etc. So I think that's
Yes.
something that is very important, the hierarchy, even within working on understanding.
Correct. 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 No, I agree. I agree totally. Okay. Some simple, a very simple game or an activity that parents can do at home, or even therapists, young therapists can incorporate in your sessions. Sorting out is a great activity to build receptive language. So have a bag full of different items. So say put in some clothes and food items in a bag, and ask the child to pull out what's in the bag, and then sort it out in different trays to see clothes are different from um, food. So
Food.
you can mix in vegetables, dry fruits, or clothes from the laundry, and then ask your child to make piles of various items that go together. Can be a very simple game. It strengthens new vocabulary. It not only gives new words, but you can also link the new words to the older words,
That's right.
and categorizing and sorting really helps. So that
I
can be a
just
very
want to,
simple.
yeah, maybe I'll
Yes.
just add another idea a little further to that. So I think I always talk about very daily routine activities. So I'm just going to add one more. And I think people who've been following my articles, I do have a blog for one special place where I'm looking at everyday items that can be used for building skills, and speech skills is one of them. So let's look at vegetables. I think initially, when you're building receptive skills and you go shopping, you want to show the child the vegetables and the fruits that you are shopping at the shop. Reinforce that learning
Yes.
when you bring it back in a bag. Reinforce that learning when you're actually going to eat it, or you're washing it or cutting it. And the child may
Yes.
surprise you the next time you say apple, and he'll actually bring you an apple, maybe after a month of doing this. So those things become very, very crucial too.
Yes, absolutely. So what I call them full circle activities. So you go out, you do the shopping, you get the stuff, you wash it, you eat it. I also do it. Have advised a lot of parents to do it with laundry.
Absolutely.
So
Yes. Fun.
you take off your clothes, put them in the correct laundry bin, and when you're putting them for wash, involve the child in putting the washing liquid and everything, and dry them, fold them, iron them, and put them on. So yeah, that can be another example of building more receptive. language and meaningfully expanding language, really,
Yes.
how those things are used and correctly
So
building on.
there's a practical part that I hear a lot of parents having told me when doing these full circle activities, which I advocate as much as you. They believe it just slows down the process. They are unable to complete the process of doing the activity. So my response to that is either you put in more time. So it's something that you would do in 10 minutes by yourself. Make sure that you keep out or carve out 20 minutes because you know you're going to redo a part of the activity you're doing with a young child
Yes,
and you're going to
absolutely.
specify the time. It's tough to do it within the 10 minutes that you do by yourself, but spend that extra time or make it an activity for the child. So that's when you're not trying to get it done by laundry by yourself. You're actually just doing it for the
Yes,
child. So I think practically
yes,
sometimes it bogs a parent down saying, how will I get my work done if I have to do these activities with them? So those are simple things that I can think of off the bat that I would like to tell the parents.
yes, yes. Completely agree with you. Okay, so that brings us to expressive language. Tanu, your thoughts on expressive
Yes.
language skills and how
So going
important
back,
they are.
oh, super important. uh, so going back to the pyramid, expressive is one of the topmost bits of the pyramid. I hope everybody remembers that because build, 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 and then go to the top. Otherwise, you're going to have a breakdown. Breakdown in terms of communication, a breakdown in terms of nervousness, frustration, etc.
Yes,
So always remember that. That's something I'll start with. But yes, building expressive skills is very, very crucial because society demands that we talk and communicate with everybody as much as using nonverbal cues. So when we're building expressive skills with a child, first and foremost, I would say pull down the pressure. Don't say you have to say this or you must talk or why aren't you talking or why don't you tell this to auntie or say this right now. That's something that comes very naturally to us because you want the child to be socially correct and speak at different points in time. So, but you must understand as a parent, as a therapist, that the pressure just really adds on. So, if a child cannot say when you say it, a child knows it many times that, oh, maybe I missed that chance. I don't know what's going to happen. And this keeps building on. So, build expressive language without pressure. So that means, and then something we'll talk about a bit later, is give the right environment. Use a lot of modeling. So modeling means you would say the word and let the child decide if he wants to say it back. You would also use simple words initially or simple sounds
yes,
initially, and then you would build on using full words, full phrases. Play a lot of games. Make it fun because if it's not fun, a child might not
yes,
want to participate. And within the speech session, or even when you're sitting and doing activities at home, do it in as much fun a way as you can. So it can be take a car and you want a child to use sounds. That's what you're going to do. I'd say you're not going to
yeah,
say boo, say boo. That won't work. And that's just too much pressure. So
yeah,
those are
yeah,
ways that we need to
yes,
build it on. And some children are going to take longer to speak than the others. So comparing from one child to the other, from with peers in class, with friends who they hang out with, it's going to be too stressful on the parent or on the therapist if you're going to continue comparing. Each child has their own trajectory to speak.
yeah,
So a few activities that I can just think of really quickly would be using a lot of the objects that you're using for receptive skills and continuing to use the words very, very often with the child. Again, continue to use the
yes,
sing song pattern that you were for receptive skills, but let the child watch your face more often so that he or she knows how to say the words in case he's missed that. Again, use words very, very often meaningfully. So, a lot of the receptive skills pointers will come back on the expressive skills. Just that your
yes,
pressure to say should be low, and you need to be euphoric when you hear something, even if it's a sound, even if it's a weak, soft sound, in my opinion, but you're hearing something. which I think you must celebrate with the child, and the child should know that you're celebrating that. It'll encourage him or her more, in my opinion. So,
Yes,
use
absolutely.
objects,
Yeah.
photos.
Absolutely. So all this is listed in that album again, and all of you can go and have a peep into that. I had planned a quick, simple activity, so which all moms can do with young children. So I have this fruit with me, and you can play a game. I've named it randomly a magic word game. So you take out a fruit, any object really, and ask the child to describe it. So you can give prompts, and you can say, okay, what color is it, and what does it feel like, and then you introduce what question. So what do we do with it? What is it? And is it a fruit or a vegetable? Child is older, you can also throw in questions, the where questions. Where do apples grow, or where do we keep apples in the house? And next step is to introduce who questions, who questions, who likes apples, who has bought these apples. So these are again very simple tips that you can use at home to enhance expressive language skills in children using very basic common objects found at home. No need to buy fancy tools or toys. And I think Tanushree writes a lot on using home items. She did mention it. So you're most welcome to go and visit those articles. We'll post them in this discussion thread once we are done with the event today. Also about expressive language skills, you can also if your children are already talking in words, and they are ready to form join two words or more to form sentences, you can again use simple objects, give prompts, and so you can either use common objects like a fruit or a ball, or you can also get some unusual objects like this. So something that your child doesn't see every day, and it makes him think a little more. And then you say, okay, let's add an adjective to it. Okay, so this is, say, a basket, and this is a yellow basket, and how does it feel? And that's how the child gets the initial sort of thing to talk a little more with you, and practice the words that he's using, practice the sentences that he's using. You can also play guess what games. So you can take some pictures and hide a reward under one picture and say, okay, I'm thinking about, say I have a picture of a frog laid down in front of me, and say, okay, I'm thinking about six things to think. What category does it belong to? So I'm thinking about an animal, and it jumps, and it looks like a toad, and it does not look like a cow, and the the word begins with an F. And let the child think and see, okay, now what what the mummy is saying is she's talking about a frog, and that's how you pull out the picture. And then you do the turn taking, where the child gives you the clues and you have to hunt the pictures. So that's how you can build on some longer sentences. We also have a lot of, I will be posting a few items of articles under this post today to build on more sentences, some more activities in this, for parents who can go up and read up on more ideas. Um, okay, we have somebody's question, Tanu. I'd like to.
Sure.
Okay, so she says it's Aarti with us, and Aarti says how to ask child to speak loudly. Is it good to ask them to speak loudly?
Okay, hi Arti. We know each other from earlier, so it's nice to have you view this event. Happy Mother's Day. Um, a couple of things I would look at is trying to figure out what the natural loudness of the child is. So I'm considered softer than a lot of my other peers, even my brother, my sibling. So I would firstly would suggest to understand what's the natural loudness of the child. And after that, I would look at appropriateness in different environments. Is the child able to understand that he needs to speak louder when there's a lot of noise around? Understand that he needs to speak louder if someone said, okay, I cannot hear you, even if they're across the table. That those are a few things that I would say you think about before you actually work on speaking loudly. It's only appropriate if the child understands the concept of loud and soft. Then I would actually push working on loudness, and the child can use a louder voice naturally. So, a couple of ways for children who understand a lot more, I would ask you to use visuals. So it can be like a thermometer, for example, where you have the top would be have to be really loud, the bottom is where you have to be really soft, and then the child has to gauge the different environments. And for example, okay, I'm out in the shopping complex, and it's blaring with music, and people are talking. How loud do you think I need to be? And the child will have to kind of gauge, I need to be soft or loud. And you can show the child or demonstrate to the child, oh, you're saying really loud, and then really talk loudly at that point, and let him imitate. That's just one simple example that you can do. But the idea is to get the child to understand. It's not only saying speak up, speak loudly. Maybe he's not really understanding why you're asking him to do that. So get that understanding around, and then work on pushing it higher. If you think the child can on a regular basis, or depending on the situation. Would you like to add something, Pratiksha?
No, I think you summed it up really well. I think
Okay.
it's a great idea to work. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Going back to the North Star. uh, I think, Tanu, we can talk about something about the environment that you did mention a couple of times before. So we it's so important for us to have uh, a stimulating environment, a speech stimulating environment, which should be
Absolutely.
adequate for boosting communication. So,
Yes.
what are your experiences in this particular
So we
aspect?
cannot undermine its importance. I think it's very, very important that the environment the child is has a good amount of stimulation. When I mean stimulation, it's in terms of the speech and language skills. So in what I've seen is again taking from my experience as being a mother. Since it's Mother's Day, I would like to do that. I've constantly made it a point to give that environment and kind of educate people around, saying that environment has to be given. So when I mean the environment and mean using the right language, I want to use Hindi or English, then using the right words. I want to use simple words when my child was really young and consistently use them in meaningful ways. I want to encourage specific words. So, like I was saying, I want to encourage words of anger or milk, for example. So, I would provide that within the environment. And since I was a primary caregiver, I was able to do that again and again and again and again. And by doing that, I saw that the child was able to give back the information and start speaking the same thing with me much quicker had I not given it. And in my
Yes.
experience as a speech therapist working with children, it is a parent who needs to understand the importance of this, because you, as a parent, are spending maybe 23 hours out of the 24 hours of a day, or 16 hours of the 18-hour awake time. So it becomes very important that you remember to do this. It doesn't come naturally. And I think initially in the speech training days, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to speak so much? But once it becomes more natural, once you have that cued in that, oh, I need to use words of open, close, I need to use adjectives, oh, I need to use WH questions when talking to my child, it becomes very important. A couple of things that I have told parents along the line that seems to have worked really well is have a whiteboard or a blackboard behind where you can view it on a daily basis. And for mothers, it happens to be the kitchen fridge. Have that up, and when you're working with a speech therapist, you're going to write down the words that you want the child to learn, and you write those down for the week. So every time you pass by, have a glimpse. Remind yourself, are you
Yeah.
using these words enough? Are you using number words enough when you're working on numericals with the child? Are you using a specific language enough if you really need to build that for the child? So it really depends what your goal is with the speech therapist or with your child who's not yet talking, and then you reinforce it. So that's a very simple way that you can remind yourself. So should I talk to them a little about the webinar, or would you like to do
Yes.
that? Yeah.
No, no, no. I
Okay.
think Tanu, yes.
Okay, so I'll take
Please.
this opportunity to tell you that we are going to be holding a webinar that talks about this. So it's going to be called How to Talk to Your Child with Speech Delay. So it is talking about the speech environment you create with your child. So whenever there's a child who has speech delay, I think our first thought is, how can I get the child to speak? But I'm going to reverse the question back on the parent and say, how should you as a parent talk and provide that speech environment so that you can help your child to learn? And why this is very important, it goes back to lessening the pressure. You don't want to pressure the child to speak if the child is finding it tough, but you want to encourage the child. And encouragement truly works. What I've seen with children, what I've heard from parents, you encourage in the right direction, there is a better likelihood of the child learning faster without pressure, without the issues of pressure. So that's a simple thing that we'll be holding in June, which is next month. So I do hope some of you who are viewing will be able to join us for it too.
Yes, we would leave a link once we are done with the webinar in the comment section. If you're interested, please click book and register for the webinar, which will happen. We'll announce the date. And yeah, so I think we are almost wrapping up today's discussion on speech therapy tips. Just quick reminders about understanding that children learn best, whether they're learning to talk or learning language or learning anything, when they're having fun and enjoying what they're doing. So you make sure whatever activities that you incorporate are light-hearted, and little, usually less is more. So rather than doing, sitting with the child, no, I have to sit and talk and read a book, and making it a lengthy, boring 50 minutes, 1 hour session. Do small 10-minute reading sessions at home, which are more effective. More of those shorter interactions than with than longer, um, longer sessions with your children at home.
Absolutely.
And obviously incorporate day-to-day activities to impart language as much as you can. And we also spoke about repetition and how great repetition is when dealing with children who are learning to talk. Do not be afraid of using the same words again and again, and use them variously and more meaningfully, and that way, that's how children remember more. And you should always incorporate things which children like to do, or specifically their interests. So for example, if a child likes, say, Mickey Mouse or Dora, so make up those stories and use those characters while talking and doing things with your children. And involve different teaching methodologies and approaches, wherein you incorporate all senses. So touching, tasting, feeling, hearing, looking, everything. Because we all have heard that famous Chinese proverb that says, I hear, I forget, I see, I remember, I do, and I understand. And that's exactly what we want our kids to understand, the words and language around them. And that's how they would really learn to talk. And like Tanushree has been harping, and so do I, that all children develop at different rates. So never compare children. Some children find it easy to learn to talk, some take a little while. But if you keep linking information to what the child already knows, you would, I'm sure, have good success. And we hope that today's little event discussion has added value to your Mother's Day, to your day, and you have learned something out of this discussion with Tanushree and myself today. We look forward to understanding and getting your feedback to see which are the areas that you would want us to hold more discussions on, so that we can make it a value added platform for you all. Please sign up for the webinar, and let us know if you have any questions. We would be happy to get back to you. Okay. All right, then it's a goodbye from our end. We all understand communication is the foundation for getting a great start in life. So here's to good communication, and happy Mother's Day to everyone once again. Okay, Tanushree, thanks a
All
lot for
right.
your time today, and
Thanks,
have
Pratiksha.
bye bye. Thank you. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, bye bye.